Hello and welcome again in continuation of my previous presentation on the environment and now exploring climatic change, a challenge for corporate ESG in India. Climate change is one of the biggest challenges facing India today. India is already witnessing changes in rainfall pattern, rising temperature and increased frequency of extreme weather events like floods, drought and cyclones. One major contribution to climatic change across the globe including India, is the greenhouse gas emission from human activities. India's emissions have been rising steadily over the past few decades, though its per capita emissions are still below the global average. Key sources of emissions in India include energy production from fossil fuels like coal, increasing vehicle emission due to rising number of vehicles, emission from factories and industries, changing land use pattern and agriculture activities like paddy cultivation, fertilizer usage and livestock rearing. Despite the upcoming many alternative energy conservation techniques like wind, solar, hydro, etc., coal has been the mainstay of India's energy sectors for decades. As India pursues economic growth, its appetite for coal still will continue to rise, leading to higher level of coal consumption for energy. This is a major contributor to India's greenhouse gas emission. Deforestation is another concern. While India has increased its overall forest cover in recent years, some researchers argue that the quality of forest is declining due to legal and illegal logging. Loss of forest reduces carbon sequestration from trees and leads to other environmental issues like soil erosion, water scarcity, loss of biodiversity, etc. Waste management is also a growing challenge. Rapid urbanization in India has led to exponential increase in the municipal solid waste level, most of which end up with the landfills. The decomposition of organic waste in landfills produces methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Apart from emission, experts believe changes in the monsoon could also impact India due to climatic change. India is heavily dependent on the 4-month southwest monsoon season for the majority of its annual rainfall. Rising temperature due to global warming are likely causing shift in the monsoon pattern over India. Some studies suggest the monsoon is getting weaker over the past century. Any fluctuation in the monsoon can disrupt India's agriculture output and causes water shortage for hundreds of millions of people, thereby affecting livelihoods, food security, and the economy of the country. Tackling climatic change requires global cooperation as impact transcends national borders. Hence, India also needs to proactively contribute to reducing the global greenhouse gas concentration. Financially, politically, and policy leadership lies at the bottom of all the recommendation for a thriving climatic change policy for India. Regional, state, national, and global involvement are the most effective key for India to meet its aspiration of a climate resilient planet and achieve long-term sustainable growth. So now let us explore the environment component under the ESG framework. As pointed out earlier in my presentation, there are 11 major elements related to environment. I will have a glance at all the points shown in the slides. Reducing carbon emission across operations and value chain is imperative to mitigate climate change risk. Businesses needs to measure, report and reduce carbon emission through improving energy efficiency, installing renewable energy, electrifying process and switching to low carbon material. Adopting clean technology using green fuels and investing in carbon offset can accelerate decarbonization. Analysis carbon and water footprint by tracking emission and water usage in all activities is crucial for ESG. Strategies like water recycling and rainwater harvesting need implementation to improve water use efficiency. Life cycle assessment helps understand the environmental footprints across product life cycles. Controlling emission of greenhouse gas like carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide is also vital to reduce climate impact. Monitoring major greenhouse gas emission sources and investing the abatement technology to improve the industrial process and energy generation is important. Adopting ambitious net zero target by balancing emissions with removals in gaining prominency in mitigating climatic change contribution. Businesses need short and long-term plan to achieve net zero through clean energy, electrification, carbon capture, and growing carbon sink. Sustainable waste management through reduction, reuse, recycle, and recovery approaches across operation is critical. Responsible waste disposal, recycling initiative, avoiding food loss and waste, and developing waste to energy and waste to resource system are key focus area. Green logistic by optimizing transport and switching to renewable fuel can decrease environmental footprint across supply chain. Procuring climate-friendly raw materials and packaging also boosts green supply chain efforts. Promoting recycling, remanufacturing, and product takes back systems create a circular economy that maximize resource utility and minimize waste. Designing products and process for durability, recyclability, and recycled content usage aids circularity. Energy conservation across facility, process, and equipment by tackling energy performance, retrofitting inefficient systems, and utilizing renewable energies helps to reduce emission and optimize cost. Thus, a multi-dimensional ESG strategy encompassing these key environmental components can help drive sustainability across a company's value chain. The focus must be on innovation, technology adoption, stakeholders collaboration, and robust monitoring and reporting. Environmental stewardship is vital for building competitive advantage and a resilient future business landscape. In my last presentation, I appealed to the viewers to classify these 11 elements of the environment according to their industries in which one is serving. Do you know what are the benefits of doing such classification? Let me explain you in detail. The moment you think about the environmental parameters to be integrated with the industry, immediately you realize that first comes in mind is related to the product and the process involved in it, and later comes to a raw material, where one develops the cause and effect relation of the process being involved in producing the desired product. The moment we think about the process, the first thing required to produce the desired material is related to the green raw material and what significance it has in the ESG framework about the environment. There are 5 major characteristics of green raw materials used in process units typically, such as one is renewable. Green raw material are sourced from the renewable sources that can be regenerated with a reasonable time break. The other is related to sustainable, means the extraction of the production of the green raw material does not, despite natural resources, harm the environment significantly. Third is related to green raw material having lower carbon and water footprint than traditionally raw materials, resulting in reduced greenhouse emission. Fourth is related to green raw material that are non-toxic and do not threaten human health or environment during their production. And the last is related to ethical sourcing. Green raw material are sourced ethically, ensuring fair labor practice and responsible supply chain management. Once you think about these 5 points, it strikes immediately in our mind related to green technology products, which are result aims to reduce waste, cut pollution, and even diminish fossil fuels use. Some of the important types of green technology products includes energy creation products, green chemicals, sustainable or recyclable products, and technology that provides renewable alternative energy. The key environment components that require focused strategies for ESG compliance includes carbon emission, carbon and water footprint, greenhouse gas emission, net zero goals, waste management, green logistic, recycling, circular economy, and energy conservation. This in turn promotes the concept of green investment that focuses on companies or projects committed to the conversion of natural resources related to low emission energy supply, including renewable energy. Other is to pollution reduction, that is use of biofuel and nuclear energy efficiency in the energy supply and energy consuming sector. And the last is other environmentally conscious business practices such as carbon capture, sequestration, including deforestation and agriculture. Thus, the concept of green bonds emerged typically aligned with the international standards such as the Green Bond Principle or the climate bonds initiative standard, which are debt instruments that finance projects with positive environmental benefits such as renewable energy projects, energy efficiency improvement, or waste management initiative. These activities under green bonds are subject to independent verification to ensure compliance with the green bond principle, with regular reporting on the environmental impact of the project funded by the bonds. This helps the investors in green bonds are increasingly looking for transparency and accountability in the use of proceeds and the environmental benefits achieved. I hope by now the viewers have understood the significance of the environmental elements under the ESG framework. During my previous presentation on the environment, I gave much importance and comparison of ISO with Indian prevailing laws related to the environment. Both ISO and the Indian Act's rules serve crucial roles in environmental protection. ISO standards provide a global benchmark for best practices, while the Indian Acts and rules serve as a legal framework with enforceability. Gearing up with the ESG commitment, integrating robust environmental management into India's growth story, with investors and its stakeholders worldwide increasingly focus on ESG parameters. Indian enterprises must urgently embrace a robust environmental management system to showcase their sustainability credentials. The ISO 14001 standard guides holistic and integrated systems to minimize environmental impact across operations. Beyond just compliance, the goal must be continuous improvement in environmental performance through the top management commitment, quantitative monitoring of carbon emissions, energy and water usage, waste generated, and greenhouse gas emission, internal audits, preventive and corrective action, employees training, and stakeholder engagement. Leveraging the life cycle assessment tool as per ISO 14064 to accurately measure greenhouse gas emission across the value chain, which include the scope 1, 2, and 3, is a key for science-based target setting and net zero planning. Ambitious action on reducing emission, switching to renewable energy, zero waste system, and carbon sequestration is vital in India's race to net zero by 2070. However, the ESG imperative goes beyond the operational boundaries. Enterprises must advocate the enable sustainability across their ecosystem of suppliers, dealers, vendors, partners, and consumers. Building awareness and playing a stewardship role for the environment by setting examples, handholding stakeholders, providing access to green technology, and even financial sustainable transition foster positive ripple effects. Transitioning to renewable energy, embracing circular economy and nature-based solution, optimizing logistics, preventing deforestation, and partnering with the SME and farmers to adopt regenerative practice helps green the wider value chain. This creates a shared value. Finally, supporting robust carbon market and pricing in India through voluntary and compliance mechanism catalysts meaningful climatic action. Putting a value on emission reduction, incentive investment, unlocks climate finance and mainstream climate consideration in decision making by businesses and individuals alike. With the Glasgow Climate Pact stressing Article 6 market mechanism and India's net zero trajectory, enterprises must gear up, integrate carbon market as part of their mitigation portfolio through high quality carbon credit and offset. The message is clear. Enterprises who proactively incorporate environmental management system, life cycle thinking, net zero planning, supply chain sustainability, and carbon market at the core of the ESG blueprint will gain a competitive edge, contribute to the national goal, and build climate resilience for the future. The time for action is now. Now we'll see the status of carbon emission in India. India's soaring population of 140 million and fast-growing economy have resulted in India's carbon emission rising dramatically in the last 2 decades. This growth has seen India in 2021 become the world's third largest emitter of the greenhouse gas after China and US. The 8.2% rise in the India's annual CO2 emission for 2023 would be more than the double the expected increase in China, which is set to see a 4% growth this year. Nevertheless, India's per capita greenhouse gas emissions are well below the global average at just 2.8 ton carbon CO2 emission. Additionally, India's contribution to historically cumulative CO2 emission is also far less than other major economies at less than 4%. India has made several commitments to address carbon emission. First is India has committed to achieving the net zero emission target by 2070. Second is India aims to reach a non-fossil fuel energy capacity of 500 gigawatts by 2030. Next is India plans to fulfill at least half of energy requirement via renewable energy by 2030. India aims to reduce CO2 emission by 1 billion ton by 2030. Other is India plans to reduce carbon intensity below 45% by 2030. Well, last but not the least is India is committed to reducing the emission caused by the activities for the nation's economic growth by 45% by the year 2030 from 2005 levels. These commitments were part of India's Panchtantra declaration at COP26. However, under current policy, India's overall emissions are still expected to rise beyond 2030. To ensure a fair contribution to the global climate crisis, India's emission would need to stay below the emission projected under the current policy. To date, major confusion arises among the industries as to which is the official authorized body to measure the carbon emission. In India, the measurement and regulation of carbon emission for industries fall under the purview of the various government agencies and regulatory bodies. The primary authorities responsible for monitoring and regulating carbon emission in India are Central Pollution Control Board is the apex regulatory body for environmental protection in India. The CPCB set emission standards for various industries and conducts periodic inspection to ensure compliance. State Pollution Control Board. Each state in India has its own State Pollution Control Board, which work in coordination with the Central Pollution Control Board and monitor emission from industry operating within their respective state. Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change is the central government ministry responsible for formulating and implementing policies and regulation related to environment protection and climate change. It works in collaboration with CPCB to set national environmental standards and policies. National Accreditation Board for testing and calibration of laboratory in India that performs emission testing and analysis. Accredited laboratories are authorized to conduct emission measurements and provide accurate data for regulatory compliance. Indian Forest Service is responsible for monitoring and managing forest cover and carbon sequestration efforts. Forests plays a crucial role in mitigation carbon emission by absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere. Bureau of Energy Efficiency, while focuses on energy efficiency, it also focuses a role in emission reduction by promoting energy efficient technology and practices in industries. Other additional agencies are the National Accreditation Board for Education and Training, approved certification bodies to train and certify energy auditor, and additionally, industry may also engage third-party environmental consultants. Industry needs to adhere to emission and standard and regulatory requirements set by these authorities. Compliance with the emission standard is often mandatory, and industries are required to install emission control equipments and regularly monitor and report their emission. Non-compliance can lead to penalties and legal action. So in summary, CPCB, SPCB, accredited private agency and in-house team conduct primary emission measurement and monitor for industries as per the central and the state government norms in India. Well, these slides look methods of carbon emission in India. Some of the key methods used for measuring carbon emission from industries in India are direct emission measurement. This involves real-time monitoring of actual stake emission using continuous emission monitoring system installed at source. Parameters like CO2, CO, particulates, SO2, etc. are tracked to compute carbon emission, mandatory for large industries under pollution control norms. Emission factor establishes the average emission rate of pollutant from given source based on source design, fuel type, operating condition, etc. Used where continuous monitoring is not feasible. Industry-specific emission factor guidelines are published by CPCP and NCTL. Another is mass balance approach. This is calculated based on the material consumption, process input and efficiency, energy input and output while accounting for removals, transfer and storage using conversion of mass principle, suitable for refineries, cement, steel plants, etc. Another is based on the fuel calculation. Emission estimated based on quantity of fuel consumed, their calorific value and default CO2 emission factors for respective fuels as prescribed by IPCC guidelines or local norms. Simpler method subject to availability of reliable fuel usage data. Another is the most important is life cycle assessment. Evaluate emissions across the full product life cycle from raw material extraction, production, transportation, use phase and waste management. Provide comprehensive estimates but more complex. Another is emission model. Mathematical models stimulate chemical reaction and processes to estimate emissions from input operating data. Recommended for vessels, power plants, oil and gas industries, etc. with a high accuracy. Last but not the least is the ambient air quality control. Track CO2 level in ambient air using automated air analyzer around the industry to estimate carbon footprints, supplementary and may be influenced by other source. While other methods like data logger and sensors, remote sensing technology, carbon accounting software, carbon credit and offset, and personal audit and inspection are some other method to know the carbon emission. The choice of method depends on the complexity of the operation, relates reliability requirement, instrumentation availability, regulatory norms, and technical capabilities. A combination of approaches may be adopted for comprehensive and monitoring. Now let us see issues and challenges of carbon emission in India. India faces a multifaceted challenges in reducing carbon emission as a rapidly developing economy. While making strides in renewable energy, issues like high fossil fuel dependency, balancing growth and emission policy gaps, social concern and equity consideration persist. Heavy reliance on coal for over 70% of electric exacerbates emission and air pollution. Transportation and other sectors also extensively use fossil fuels. Rapid industrialization and economic growth make regaining in emission harder. Implementation and enforcement of policy suffers from lack of concrete plans, inadequate funding and expertise, weak monitoring and poor coordination across governance level. Transitioning away from fossil fuels poses risk of job loss and energy affordability issues requiring careful management. India argues for differentiated responsibility, highlighting its low historical per capita emission and the need of developed nations to provide financial and technological support. Effective international collaboration is crucial for escalating India's clean energy transition. Additional challenge arises from deforestation, reducing natural carbon sink, and climate change impact exacerbating the situation. Competing development priorities like energy access and lack of affordable low carbon alternative for major emitting industries like steel and cement add to complexity. Data gaps inhibits robust target setting and policy formulation. Monitoring and reporting capabilities need strengthening. Shifting away from fossil fuel intensive lifestyle requires a huge behavioral transformation. However, India is demonstrating commitment through ambitious goal of net zero by 270 and boosting renewable. India's like perform, achieve and trade and ROP are driving energy efficiency and renewable adoption. Investing in green technology can unlock cleaner development pathway. Going forward, India must diversify its energy mix towards renewable, improve energy efficiency across sectors, strengthen implementation, enforcement and monitoring of policies, addresses social and economic concerns of affected communities, and foster international cooperation on technology, knowledge, and financial transfer. The path to low carbon growth has challenged but harassing the opportunity and partnership. India can progress climate action while meeting its development needs. India's journey towards a low carbon future is complex and challenging, but by addressing these issues, capitalization on opportunities, it can navigate these landscape and contribute significantly global climate action. Thus, even as India actively engages in climate action, it faces socio-economic realities and structural limitations that constrain the low carbon transition. Supportive international partnership can facilitate overcoming these barriers over the times. One of the remarkable efforts made by the India is the launch of the Green Credit Program for ESG program in India. The Government of India has proposed a draft notification for implementation of the Green Credit Program to promote sustainable lifestyle and incentives climate action. The scheme proposed implementation rule of Green Credit Program, which is positioned as a key initiative under the India's lifestyle of environment movement for engaging citizens and stakeholders in climatic action and environmental stewardship. This voluntary market-based mechanism will enable earning and trading of green credit by individual, communities, business and organizations for undertaking the environmental friendly activities across sectors like agriculture, forestry, industry, etc. Green credit can also from small enterprises to local bodies to private companies. The program aims to leverage competitive market and credit trading to promote conservation, modernization in resource use and low carbon development. The draft rules outline the institutional framework, procedure and safeguards. Overall, the initiative aims to drive impactful climate action through a credit-based reward mechanism. It commences with the title Green Credit Program's Implementation Rule of 2023 with the objective to create a market-based mechanism for providing incentive in the form of green credit to individuals, farmer producer organization, cooperative, forestry enterprises, sustainable agriculture enterprises, urban and rural local bodies, private sector, industries and organization for environment positive action, and create mass movement around the environment positive action and realize the vision of mission life through a pro-planet people and entities. Further, it makes clear the act by defining the meaning of green credit with the accredited green credit verifier with a registered entity, making more clarity about the registry, thereby giving the significance of or as a third party certifier with a clear defining the terms of verification through the empanel auditors entitled for auditing the entire system of the program. The Green Credit Program will be implemented in phases, starting with the 2 to 3 activities in sectors like tree plantation, water conservation, sustainable agriculture, waste management, air pollution reduction, mangrove conservation, eco-mark labeling, and sustainable building. More activities and sectors will be added in subsequent phase with the government approval. The program aims to promote environmental stewardship through credit-based incentives for climate-friendly actions across these areas. A phased approach allows the iterative development and expansion of the various market mechanisms. The methodology for generating green credit will involve setting activity-specific threshold and benchmark aligned with the legal obligation. One green credit unit will be allocated based on the equivalent environmental outcomes across the sector. Digital process will be developed for self-assessment, registration, credit issuance, performance monitoring, and other aspects of the program. A steering committee comprising the government expert, industries, and stakeholders will govern the Green Credit Program. It will approve procedures, guidelines, and process, make recommendation on activities, sectors, demand creation, review implementation, and advise the government. The committee will monitor and enable the effective rollout of the program. Continuing from the previous slide, let us look forward. The Indian Council Forestry Research and Education will serve as a Green Credit Program Administrator responsible for overall implementation, including the management, monitoring, operation. Key functions include developing guidelines, process and methodologies, constituting experts committee, establishing system for registration, certification, credit issuance, trading platform, and accreditation of the third-party verifier, issuing digital credits, collecting fees, capacity building, compiling reports, and undertaking other tasks assigned by the steering committee and government. The administrator will provide the institutional framework to operationalize the various aspects of the program, spanning registration, monitoring, verification, certification, registry, trading, knowledge of management, and stakeholders engagement. The administrator can constitute technical committee for each activity to develop the methodologies and process for registration and credit issuance. These committees will comprise governments, organization, and subject experts. They will recommend methodologies for credit allocation, measurement, reporting, verification mechanism, and advise on the other technical matters for their respective activity referred by the administrator. As regards the Green Credit Registry and its function, the administrator will establish an electronic Green Credit Registry for recording the issuance, holding, transfer, and acquisition of the credits as per the prescribed standards. Key functions include entity registration and credit accounting, maintaining a secure database of transactions, establishing linkage with other registries, indemnifying entities for security breach, complying with the committee directions and other responsibility defined in the guidelines. The standardized registry will provide accurate tracking and accounting of credit to enable trading among the registered stakeholders as per the specified security protocols. Further, it is related to trading knowledge and data platform, where the guidelines for trading platform to exchange green credit will be issued by the administrator with the committee approval. An accredited trading service provider will establish the platform enabling credit trading as per the guideline. Separately, a knowledge of data platform will be an online portal for transparency on activities, sectoral progress, and achievement under the program. It may collate information from credit registry and other sources like best practices and capacity building to publicly showcase program implementation. The Green Credit Program Administrator will accredit entities to serve as a green credit verifier according to the established guideline. The key responsibilities of these accredited verifiers includes conducting verification assessment of registered entities and activities and submitting reports to administrative recommending the grant of credit based on their audits. Further, the verifier must also submit annual return to the administrator as per the guideline. Demand generation for credit under the program will be voluntary based, with the steering committee recommending measures to spur participation across the sector. Entities registered for compensatory afforestation will need to register with the Green Credit Registry to qualify the credits related afforestation activity. Additionally, the central government can empanel independent auditors to periodically audit the overall functioning, processes, and administration of the Green Credit Program. Hello, this slide explains the methodology for calculating green credit concerning tree plantation. Very recently, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climatic Change in India, through a notification dated February 22nd, 2024, has outlined the methodology for calculating green credit concerning tree plantation under the Green Credit Rule 2023, established under the Environment Protection Act of 1986. Rule 5 of the Green Credit Rules empowers the central government to notify the methodology for calculating the green credit. The central government, following the recommendation of the administrator, issues the current notification to specify the methodology for calculating green credit, particularly for the tree plantation as shown in the slide. The entire methodology is explained in bullet points in the slide. The notification mandates the Forest Department of each state and union territory to identify degraded land parcels such as open forest, scrub land, waste land and catchment area under their jurisdictions for tree plantation. These areas are to be made available to promote activities aimed at increasing the country's green cover, generating green credit under the mentioned rules. The identified land must be free from the encumbrance and have a size of 5 hectares or more. Entitles interested in undertaking tree plantation for green credit can apply to the administrator. Upon receiving the application, the administrator will identify suitable land and assign it to the applicant, who must then submit a proposal for the tree plantation. A demand note including the cost of plantation and administrative expense will be issued to the applicant, who must pay the specified amount within a given period. After payment, the Forest Department, under the direction of administrator, will carry out tree plantation based on the management plan or working plan to be completed within the 2 years from the payment date. Upon completion, the Forest Department will submit a report to the administrator and issue a certificate of completion to the applicant. The administrator, after evaluating and verifying the plantation activity, may generate and issue green credit to the applicant. The credit is calculated at 1 green credit per tree with a minimum density requirement of 1100 trees per hectare, considering a local sylviclimatic and soil condition. The green credit can be exchanged to meet compensatory afforestation compliance in case of forest and land diversion for non-forestry purpose as per the applicable law. Furthermore, the generated green credit can be used for reporting under the environmental, social and governance, that is ESG, as an ESG indicator or corporate social responsibility following the rules under any prevailing law. The notification established a comprehensive framework to incentivize the tree plantation, contributing environmental conservation and sustainable development while aligning with the broader regulatory requirements. Last slide which I am going to explain is exploring the climate change and knowledge portal, which is largely nobody know about this portal. So I am explaining in very brief. India is a part to measure the international agreement on climate change, including the United Nations Framework Convention on the Climatic Change, the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and the Climate Change is the nodal ministry responsible for conducting India's responses to climate change in line of the national policies and UNFCCC. Specifically, the Climate Change Division of the Ministry of Forest and Climate Change handles issues related to climate change, including the international negotiation and domestic policies and action. The key responsibilities of the Climate Change Division include submitting national communications and biennial update reports to UNFCCC, coordinating India's National Action Plan on Climate Change, which outlines strategies for climate change adaptation and mitigation, leading preparation and implementation of India's national determined contribution for emission reduction under the Paris Agreement, conducting studies to assess climate change impact in India under the programs like the Climate Change Action Program, National Carbonizes Aerosol Programs, long-term ecological observation program, and greenhouse gas modeling. Implementing the National Adaptation Funds and climate change to support adaptation in vulnerable areas, encouraging the Indian states to develop state action plan on climate change aligned with the national plan, and last but not the least is representing India in international negotiations on the climate change. All the major milestones related to climate change action activities in context to international agencies are highlighted in the slide. I appeal to all viewers to have a glance to understand the policy of India about the climatic change linked with all concerned international bodies, and please reframe all other notes and concepts which are not officially part of the Republic of India. However, a remarkable milestone India has achieved after introducing the Green Credit Program that aims to incentivize climate-friendly action by generating market-based credit for environmental activities. Overall, it harnesses competitive market to escalate India's sustainable transition, thereby giving much weightage to ESG program in India. I have completed the major elements of the environment for ESG program, but still many elements of the environment under ESG program are yet to be explored and presented for the viewers. Topics like energy conservation, waste and water management, extended producer responsibility, green logistics support system, and circular economy will be covered lately because we want to continue the series related to ESG framework for India. So stay tuned for another interesting topic on nurturing communities, social stewardship in ESG perspective. Please do not forget to subscribe the channel. See you soon. Goodbye for now.